Welcome to the Forensic Happy Hour. Took a couple weeks off, a little, I guess if you want to call it vacation, from talking. But some sun. It's getting a little bit warmer. That's great. But we have to get back to the real life. And I think this episode, especially coming back after 2 weeks, is pretty. It'd be pretty cool. I mean, it's almost like a homecoming. I actually know Jason Howell for a long time, I would say. He's been in the business a long time, and I know we'll be able to share. Probably can't share a lot of stories. I might make him, get into some stories because those are always fun. But obviously be able to, help those that have been in it forever and those obviously that are just starting out. And that's what we kind of want to do, is make sure that everyone enjoys the show. So without further ado, Jason, cheers to you. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
And one thing I want to make sure that we do is kind of go over really the progression. I mean, you even start when you're in school. I mean, what kind of the itch, especially into digital forensics, where you got started, really what drove you there, some things in between, and then, really, what you're doing now.
So I always kind of got into computers at an early age. My father did computer programming. When I was small, I used to play with boxes of punch cards. So, I mean, that's getting into the old schools of let's turn a switch on and then switch off in a row and make a letter. I mean, that's binary at its core. But, always interested in computers. And then through high school, got into them a lot more. Read the MS-DOS 5.0 manual cover to cover. So,
Sweet.
that was my first foray into an operating system. My main driver was my penmanship is horrendous. Um, and B, I can't spell to save my life. And spell check, I was like, this is the most glorious thing I've ever seen. Word processing, what is this? I should have learned to type at that time. I never did do that. So my typing skills are also as horrendous as my handwriting, especially on a smartphone. It looks like I'm typing gibberish. I had to backspace all the time. So I did that, got into college, started college, and getting into computers. Went a couple years and had been doing some freelance computer IT stuff for a while, and IT started hitting off. Actually became a career field. And then certifications came out. I'm like, wow, look at these. These need like a good idea. And then I saw the price tag and went, oh, I can't afford that. I'm a college student. And kind of got bit by the law enforcement bug while I was working a campus job. Went from being a librarian to working for the public safety department, and really had always been interested in law enforcement. So as guys that were cops went to IT, I was like, well, there's vacancies, so I went the other way. But when I got into my law enforcement career, I still kept my IT skills, computers, always worked on them, did this and that, and realized that there was this growing need for people to analyze evidence that was seized in a digital format. I was working for a small department, but we had hooked up with an investigator that did the child sex stings, the traveler ops, as we called them, with the predators online in chat rooms. The internet was blowing up. The creepers had moved online, as we like to say, and he was very good at it. And so in comes, digital evidence, and then what to do with it. At the time, the state crime lab had a phenomenal forensics program. Several examiners, some extremely smart people who I still talk with today. We took everything there, but, the problem with an open lab, as I later found on in my career, is that it gets busy and it gets backlogged. So my chief said, hey, you're good with computers. I mean, you wired the whole PD and installed our infrastructure for us on your spare time. And he's like, you want to do this? And so I went to some training. We got more involved with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, my partner that was doing the traveler chat operations. And a few years in, a position for forensics opened up full time with the Ohio Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And I applied and I received that. So I went from a part-time patrolman to full-time investigator, focused on digital forensics, peer-to-peer file sharing. I met you at a ICAC conference, and well, I'd talked to you previously through a mutual contact of ours here in Ohio a couple times, but got to meet you in person there in was it Jacksonville, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, before the guy fell in the river. Uh, that was awesome. Uh, yeah, it was. I got to chat your ear off about what I saw things going to as you did phones. Um, you were very well versed in something that I had really never even forayed into until I got into the full time position. I didn't have access to a Celebrite. Now I'm talking not the current model that everybody knows and loves with all the fancy bells and whistles. I'm talking about the original little black box that took the
Exactly.
contact list from phone and put it on a flash
Right.
drive.
Yeah.
The one that I
See, you're
called some.
dating you're dating yourself. I try not to do that sometimes, but I do it all the time. I date myself. But
Yeah,
yeah, continue.
yeah. Well, you know what made me feel real bad. One is I called the tech support, and the gentleman on the other end, I gave him the serial number to, and he went, "Wow, that's old." I was
Exactly.
like, "Oh, thank you." He's like, "Yeah, those serial numbers are way higher than that." I'm like, I just like,
Exactly.
okay, well, does that mean it's broken? He's like, "No,
Right.
I'll send you the update and the extra cables and the box that it needs."
Right. Right. Exactly.
So I was like, I just kind of looked at the guys I was working with at the time and went, have we been doing this long? And they both went, yes,
Yeah.
yes, we have. So, and just kind of got into the lab there at the ICAC, which Ohio ICAC stationed in Cleveland, Ohio. And the lab was open to all the partner agencies, which there was one in every county in Ohio.
Hmm.
And things just started flowing in. My old PD, I was using mostly open source tools, Linux as my operating system. Um, and my Windows tool was IEF. And late at night, emailing Jad, like, hey, this didn't work. And then him responding back 20 minutes later, going, oh, look at that. And then me going, it's 3 in the morning. I work midnight. What are you doing up?
Right.
But at the time, he was still a copper. He's like, well, I used to work late shift too. He's like, but I'm stuck at home because I guess he was injured. And he's like, so I have nothing better to do. I'm awake. I'm like, okay. So I used
Perfect.
that product. That was about one of my only automated tools. Everything else was just autopsies. Autopsy really was a big help back then. First early versions of that in Linux, and then just using the power of the Linux operating system to image and then scan for texts and all those great open source early tools. So
Hmm.
got access to some big tools like Access Data, Encase at ICAC, and the automated tools made life a little easier. But as the life got easier, the volume got bigger. Uh,
True.
you know, I looked today and I pulled a hard drive recently, 14 terabytes, and I looked at somebody and went, I don't have a drive big enough to image this to, even with compression. Um, if it's full, you hook it up. There's only 6.5 terabytes of data. I'm like, oh, I got a 10 terabyte drive. We're good. And I'm like, the other day I was throwing away hard drives. I pick one up, 120 gig. I'm like, myself,
What's
myself.
Can you put this in my pocket? It's just like a thumb drive. It's a
What?
little,
It was,
little
it's, a little,
flash
it's
drive.
a little bit big. It's 3.5 inch hard drive. A little heavy too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I think back at the original training, disk edit, using tools like disk edit to rebuild fat tables on floppy disks, and then I ended up
Yeah.
teaching that course several years later, and looking at the people in the class and go, we're gonna have a demo of disk edit. I know it says in your book we're all gonna do this. I'm like, one, nobody has a floppy drive in their computer because, well, they don't make them anymore, and two, you're never ever gonna do this.
Right.
Had to bite my tongue. Uh, Later that week, with a search warrant, I seized 40 floppy disks and had to image them.
Right.
And I
Exactly.
found contraband on the drives from the 90s. I was like, this guy's been collecting this crap for a long time. Luckily, I had a USB, IBM USB floppy drive. They went to an old ThinkPad. I had saved it and went, this might come in handy someday.
Right.
I built a zip disk reader because the guy at Zip Disk too found stuff on those. I'm like, man, we're digging in the weeds in this case. So, but yeah, I mean, I think every piece of media I touched had something on it, unfortunately, in that case. But hey, we caught him
Hmm.
eventually.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. Hmm.
that was a dark web case. So
Yeah. So what you've been obviously progressed through with the law enforcement side of it, and you're continuing on with the investigations. Um. So do you think that obviously the background that you had in with computers, with tinkering computers, with working with computers at, I mean, really the operating system level, we start talking about, especially with Linux and everything else, with utilizing the command line, is that something that obviously benefited you as to what you're doing, because you really progressed in utilizing from really messing around with it to really open source tools where obviously you have kind of the power and control to go over that. So how important is it to you, to I guess explain to people who might be coming into this how important that might be?
It is important. I mean, the background in IT obviously helped me with just troubleshooting. It helps me with understanding possibly where artifacts are coming from, and understanding the Microsoft culture. I hate to say it, having read an operating system manual cover to cover when I was younger, I understood how DOS worked. And then evolving into the Windows 95, 98 platform and watching DOS go away, but noticing that it did and didn't. The operating system is Windows, but at its core, the commands, the DOS commands work, obviously, in command prompt, and even today they do. Granted,
Mm-hmm.
PowerShell's a different animal, way more powerful and more Linux style commands. But yeah, having all that background, especially with the hardware and this and that, understanding the how data flows through a computer also can help. But the open source tools, I think, really in my early forensic career, having to manually do things really helps you to understand the automated tools are great. Um, you know, Again, they help speed things up, but at the end of the day, you need to know what it's doing.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need
And
to understand what's going on in the background of the tool.
so that obviously I said that not to freak people out, that understanding at the operating system level, because I to get into forensics, you don't want to scare people away, and it's not necessarily you have to know. You have to actually be able to go, oh, okay, fantastic. I'm going to, well, weird. I just wrote my own version, of Linux, and wow, that's great. It to me, it's more of understanding really artifacts, right? Utilizing automated tools is really great, but an automated tool, you have to go in and understand really where that artifact came from, right? How it was, how it wound up landing on that media. I would say that's the most important side of it, not necessarily understanding, okay, I know when this command was ran, this is exactly the side of this, the kernel. This, I think that, that's obviously might freak people out, and though there are people that can do that, but is understanding really how those artifacts are created and where they live the most important?
Yeah, I mean, when I kind of instruct people with some of the forensics, I tell them, I'll look at some of the data all the way down to what I would call the microscopic level. I mean, I'll get it down to the binary. I've been doing this a long time. I was like, but for you, I mean, we can look at this at 1,000 foot level. Because what you need to know is A, did you find data? Did you find what you need? Okay. B, where is it? And then how to get there. You know, the big thing is especially with, we go back to my last uh, 10 years at the ICAC, when I would go to court in these cases, the only thing the defense would really bring up is, well, did the defendant intentionally download, save, share, this media, these files, these images, these videos. Obviously, production cases are a completely different story because that's a whole different world. But just the download guys, it's like you needed to kind of understand it got from point A to point B, and if it left point B, how. If you found it, if you carve and you find it in unallocated space, you know, then can you find an artifact that shows how long it lived in allocated space, and what did the user interact with the file while it was active before it was deleted. Those are always very important, and that even works now. In the position I'm in now, I do more network intrusion. So I've moved into the DFIR a little bit more into the incident response side of it. And that's what we're doing more is we're pulling and doing log analysis, and memory analysis has been a big thing. Learning how to go through the RAM and then find these executables living in RAM. This malware that's kind of just hiding out in RAM space, and then figure out how it got there and then what it's
Yeah,
doing.
and yeah, I think that's a huge point because you know or the point of is really almost the life cycle of your artifact, right? Because it's plausible that someone says, okay, yeah, here's this mobile device or whatever if it's a computer, and well, there's a smoking gun that I have sitting in this, within this folder, or whatever, or say a mobile device that's weird. There's a zip file, there's this thing that's on here, or hey, there's CP that's on this memory, or actually on this memory card. Boom. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Sorry, you're in possession of this. And all right. Well, yeah. Granted, you are, but now we need to dig into this. And all you got to say is, okay, so it's the Samsung device. Yeah, it's a memory card that they placed in there. So what device did it? I mean, did it come to that device? Did it land at the device? Or is it possible that the guy says, oh man, you know what? I need to put a memory card in here, so I grab my friend's camera or whatever, and I put something in there, or I take it out of this drone. It might existed from another device, right?
Right.
So, I mean, how important just to say, okay, fantastic, I ran this thing, I have this data, but really understanding the metadata. How did it get there? And that's the point that you made about log files, especially on if you talk about Windows boxes or event logs or anything else. And log files on mobile devices are extremely important. But what's a percentage of people that you think, especially at the mobile device level, that looks at, say, the log files that are created by an Android device?
Um, your basic investigators and stuff, probably not a lot. Because they're looking for that smoking gun. They're looking for that text message. They're looking for that phone call record, or, those pictures or the video that was taken. I mean, like, oh yeah, yeah, there's the picture, or there's the video or the location data. Oh, well, the phone says it was at the crime scene at the time of the crime. Right, but the phone in the exact same line also says it was halfway around the world 2 milliseconds later. Um, and I get those questions like, well, how is the phone in 45 locations at once? I'm like, well, you have an Apple device. And Apple likes to upload information and location data to their devices via the cloud so that you have easier time finding things like hotspots and all the fun stuff that Apple likes to make your life easy. Which makes, unfortunately, in the forensics field, Apple's making people's life easy makes sometimes our life hard because we see what look like low hanging fruit or gleaning artifacts of, hey, okay, this is going to be an easy exam. And then you see where it came from. You're like, well, no, it's not, because that's totally worthless. That is not even this device recording its own location. That is Apple force feeding it information so that when the location pings in finally into the device, if it's off or maybe it's in their pocket and it's not getting enough GPS signal, but when it pops up, it can say, hey, by the way, the Apple Store is 22.2 miles away, and there are 2 cafes, a parking garage, and in your area. Would you like to walk to a museum? you know,
Right,
the
right.
smartphone things that make our life nice. And Android does it now too. I have an Android device, and if I pull up Google Maps, I mean, it's that, hey, the smart of our smart devices. I mean, smart watch, same thing. Your Internet of Things devices. I mean, everything to make your life easier. It's like, where does that data come from?
Yeah.
Does the data come from the device? Was the data user interacted data? Or is this data coming from the cloud, from a provider, from an app? And that's really the granular level where the logs really do help. Especially in mobile, Android, the log files are, really important. I've had it come up in some cases where defense experts have looked at things and said, well, we see that this artifact that was given shows it came from here. And here is a cloud or not a user interaction. And it was an easy thing to overcome because what had happened is when I generated the report in that case, the tool had found that artifact at multiple locations, but only spit out one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And stacked them.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I forgot to uncheck a box. Let me regenerate that.
Yeah.
but it makes you take a step back and go, oh yeah,
Well, the interesting thing, obviously about shared resources, because a lot of apps like to share with each other. Obviously, it's permission based, right? And they like to share. If you allow them, okay, yeah, I need to share this with WhatsApp, my contacts, or or my photo bin, or whatever that you're going to do is share within third-party apps. It's quite interesting because a lot of automated tools will do exactly that. Is that you'll find the artifact within, say, that third-party app, and you're like, oh, yeah, you know what? Now I got to figure out exactly, yeah, I have this, or, hey, yeah, I know that they use WhatsApp to do this. But if you start looking at it, you're like, oh, dude, Foursquare actually, there's this map on here. They actually used this other third-party app. If you look at the path, right, of exactly where that lives, or that image, or that thumbnail, where that's from, it's a completely different app, right? Because they wind up sharing their resources. So let me go back just really quick with, obviously talking about, and I mean, I think your progression is similar to mine of really handling and doing computer forensics and really getting into and diving into computers and finding those different types of artifacts on computers. But has your life progressed to the mobile device side of it, or is it still, I mean, oh, I get all these computers and have to do computers?
Um, so when I left the ICAC in 2020, right before the pandemic shut everything down. It's a great time to change jobs right before everything gets locked down due to global viruses. Makes that transition real smooth.
It does, yes,
Yeah,
yes. Yep.
my new employer is still processing paperwork from a year ago because they were working from home.
Right.
So things are getting filed. I'm getting notifications, and I'm like, wait,
You're
what's
like,
this?
hey, I do work here, right?
Yeah, it's like, am I still a probationary employee? I was told it was only a year, and I've been here a year since last February, but it's
Exactly.
like May, and then just
Yeah, it's
says,
like it's one of those things that the world just kind of actually has stopped spinning,
yeah,
and everyone's like, yeah, that year didn't exist. So in the history books, what does it go from 2019 March time, February time to now 2021?
yeah, and I
Um,
don't know if they've even picked it up yet because I know
no, it's still not spinning.
now our
Uh,
office is
yeah.
still only at 25% capacity, even though everyone here is fully vaccinated.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's just like,
Yeah.
work from home that the most you can. And for
Yes,
me,
let's
that
not
doesn't.
digress down that path. I
Yeah.
have way too many opinions.
So, but
So, on
if
the computer side,
yeah, the computer side, I do get the computers. Obviously, doing intrusions, those are mostly going to be computers, endpoint. But the most of my day is spent in the mobile world. Um, I don't get as ton of intrusion stuff at the moment. We were trying to actually build some relationships before the pandemic set off with some local resources to offer our services to them. That never happened, obviously. We're in that process again now to say, hey, we have these abilities and skills because I actually have two other agents trained in incident response as well that work here. But our place, we do a lot of phones because we have access to the advanced tools from several of the larger companies for unlocking phones. And so we do that for some local agencies. And I spend most of my day hacking into phones. So 90% of my cases are mobile phones. You can't see it, but if I tilt the camera down, you would see the 4.5 foot line of phones I have extracted in the last week that I'm now trying to process
right?
and then get out to investigators to do some analysis. Some of these are great. They're for other forensic guys. We're just providing the service of, hey, we'll extract the data. And
Yeah, so
before,
that's a question. Obviously, other jurisdictions that don't or aren't able, or um, other parts of your agency is it, hey, okay, here's the device, I unlocked it, or is it more of, hey, here is the output and now you do the analysis, or do you do the analysis for them as well?
it depends on who makes the request. Other offices that have trained examiners, no, it's just here's the extraction of the data, here's your raw data. They
Okay.
have all the other tools. They have the automated tools from all the
Right.
companies,
Right.
and or open source, whatever the examiners used to. And if they hit a hard point, sometimes they'll call back and look for pointers. I get that every once in a while. Like, hey, when I went through the data, I've seen this and I have the original data, so I can too pull it up. and help them with some analysis. I do that from time to time. And
Right.
then
Right.
I do get investigators to bring things in and say, hey, can you do a full analysis on this? Which I will then do. The majority of the phones is just extract the data and get it back because it's just an examiner needing assist because the tool that they have can't do it. Or
Right.
the tools they have access to can't do it. So
Right.
we have these tools here readily available for them to use. If they're local, they just come and use it themselves. We train them on it and say, hey, there you go. They just call, say, hey, can I come use that? Yep, sure, have at it. And then we have plenty of other casework we'll keep cranking around on. For people that are further out, hey, can I send this to you? And sure, and we'll go ahead and get the data for them and get it back to them so they can then process it with their tools and do their analysis and so on
Hmm.
and so forth.
So with the mobile devices, I guess during this last year and a half type, have you seen an increase in say a mobile device or the evidence pieces of evidence that you're receiving, or is it about the same? I mean, what has it been different?
Um, as word got around for what we do, got around, we started in late 2018, so all of 2019. Our agency does put this out to all of our partners and the locals and stuff. We cover 3 states, so of partner agencies with my agency here, they can send us stuff, and yeah, it has increased. We were averaging 10, 20 devices a month. Now we're running about 50 incoming a
Mm-hmm.
month.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we've got a couple agents coming back, our campaign's obviously over. So the agents are back in the building. We're trying to get a few of them trained up in the mobile device forensics. And so they can then start help pulling the load while myself and my partner here in the lab can then continue to work analysis because analysis does suffer sometimes when your backlog is
Sure.
80 or 90 mobile devices deep. We actually ran out of room in our storage area not too long ago, so it was bad. I counted probably 100 devices in there waiting, and more were coming in. So,
So that brings up a question of mine is obviously, and I kind of knew the answer of the has it slowed down, because obviously it hasn't. People are still using mobile devices, if not more. But do you think that the examination, or really, I don't want to say the art, do you think that the examinations are, because there's so many mobile devices coming in to all these different agencies, not just your own, that it becomes, just give me a tool that can triage this. I have to go through this quickly because I have to get on to the next case.
no, I've actually at the ICAC it's generating our own cases and then helping other agencies with theirs. It felt that way. I mean, even in our own cases, we had the Ohio ICAC has 2 mobile forensics labs that I helped to design and then I drove um, that we would use for search warrants. So the goal there is we do a search warrant, and we get into the home or get into the location, bring out the digital evidence, and in the front was myself, another forensic examiner. We had not as strong as your standard forensic tower, but still decent enough to run a triage tool. My favorite for computers was Forensic Explorer. It was NK6, but then it kind of wasn't supported anymore. So I flipped to Forensic Explorer because it let me in the file system really fast. And in that peer-to-peer investigation, ICACI world, I've been doing it for so long. I mean, I knew exactly where I was going.
Right.
And then until uTorrent decided it's going to run in the app data space and then basically not install itself and just kind of run in the background and not store crap. But I did find its log files eventually. It was kind of like your in private browsing. It just
Right.
like to dump crap off. So I'm like, great. Now I got to carve for my logs. This
Mm-hmm.
sucks. But we would go and, just to get that triage, and I would generate triage reports in the mobile lab and save them to a flash drive to send straight down for charging if we were to make an arrest of an offender. Um, and I had a lot of cases going just on those triages, and I would get somebody that'd ask a question, or then the prosecutor would be like, "Oh, well, the defense has raised this, this, and this," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, you charged him on a triage. This was down dirty in 15 minutes, just you know probable cause that this, we got the right person, or corroborating the story because I could hear the interview because it was right next to me, and we had a little interview room in this truck that had cameras and audio in it. So I'm listening to the guy that talking to the suspect and this and that, corroborating information, or if they're lying, show that they were lying, so the investigator could really, the interviewer could do his job or her job correctly, and to try and resolve these cases quickly, because I mean, obviously, when you're dealing with the ICAC world, it's pretty heinous stuff. So yeah, it was great, but I started seeing, and I've been seeing a lot of that happening. That it's like, well, here, like you said, here's the smoking guns. They throw it into a report, and then they walk away from it, and it's just like, okay, but did you do a little bit? It's okay to just find the smoking gun. I mean, if that's all if your case is, and this is what you're focused on, it's okay to focus on your case, especially if your search warrant is, we have a specificity requirement in the state of Ohio for state cases of what you're looking for. And if you go beyond that scope, and this also presides in the e-discovery world, more so in the civil world, because you're given a limited scope of liability in your cases, because I've done some e-discovery cases. You can see something else because obviously we have all the data, but you've got to focus here. You can't widen that view. And it started happening in our criminal cases as well. It's like, listen, this case is based on this. If you see narcotics, or you see drug trafficking or human trafficking or something else, you're going to need to do what I'd also trained other officers to do if they were working like a narcotics case and they found child pornography. Okay, well, you got to stop. Or if I was doing the exam for them, oh, yep, there's that. But my stuff's set up for scanning for child pornography, and it was doing it automatically based on hash values, and it found some on your case. And I did verify it. So now I've got to stop that. Here's your narcotics information, but this is also here, and we have to get a new warrant. And that got in a very, the court started kind of, and they're continuing. I'm seeing this a lot more around the country. Here it's not as bad here as it is per se in California or out west. Some of the guys I know out there, where it's like, listen, this involves this, to the point where if it's like you were saying, like, I know it's in WhatsApp. I know this case is based on messages in WhatsApp. They're only wanting to let them pull the WhatsApp data. Like, and some of the tools are offering selective extractions now because of things like that. I'm like, okay, well, here's the WhatsApp information that we found. That's it.
Yeah. And again, I agree with you. I think that a lot of things have come down, and I'm not faulting anything. I mean, we're talking about devices that can a terabyte SD card. I mean, we're talking lots of information that someone can still have on a mobile device, right? But unfortunately, if I'm a bad guy, I can tell you right now, it's not going to be in WhatsApp. It's not going to be. It's all these different games or all these different, and so it comes down to the thing of, you're like going, what do you do? Because I've always been on the soapbox of, man, it's great. You got to go and you have to set up. You have to make sure that you know what you're looking for. But the problem that you have is, just like you said, is there's the guy comes in and brings another mobile device and says, hey, you need to go and look at this now because we have this, right? It's always it's not going away. No. But my fear, obviously, is that it becomes so watered down in the examination. It simply becomes a utilization of an automated tool to tell me what is there. And I'm not faulting any automated tools. It's just that a third-party app comes out tomorrow. If I have that file system, the file system is available, I should be able to find what I'm looking for, whether or not an automated tool is going to parse that information out. But I don't think, and I'm starting to see a lot more, and I actually had a conversation on Twitter. But I'm starting to see a lot more examiners that are going, heck yeah, I know how to do that, and I love doing that. But I still see the other side of it is like, I don't have enough time. You know what? Either I'm on patrol, I'm doing this part-time, for my CID guys who asked me to do this. And honestly, I think the majority of law enforcement agencies, if you talk about our state and local type guys, that's exactly what they're doing. They're doing two things.
Yeah.
And so it's, how do we fix that? Do you have that? Do you have that fixed, Jason?
I don't. Unfortunately, when I was a patrolman, I mean, I worked late shifts, and the chief was like, "Well, you can do forensics because the town I worked in didn't even have a traffic light." Um, I patrolled a small village in a rural area. After about 2 a.m. when the bars were closed and I was done with them, you know, you count the number of cars coming through before the morning rush on one hand.
Yeah.
So at that point, he's like, "Hey, you can go back to station and this and that." And so I'd set things off processing or scanning, and I'd go back and start doing the analysis back then, for that couple hour period before I had to go back out because the kids are going to school or, whatever I was doing. Of course, I worked a lot of weekends too, so I didn't have that. But, or before the end of the shift, I'd do what I could. The nice thing with the ICAC unit was I wasn't a police officer. I'm still a peace officer, police officer in Ohio, but I was a prosecutor investigator. So there was no patrol division in my agency for me to when somebody got hurt or something happened or there was a cutback, or the union was having an issue. There was no, oh well, you got to hit the street, So I got to stick with the forensics. And I saw that happening in our partner agencies all the time. Guys I knew that were doing forensics 50% of the time are now doing it 25% of the time. And now it's just like, yeah, I got to put back to the street. Or for me to take the sergeant's test, I've got to go back to patrol. I got to leave the bureau. I can't be a detective to get a promotion. And, you can't fault a guy for wanting to make more money and move up in the department. And I think, here, I've moved to a federal side now. I mean, here the nice thing is it's like we need to train analysts, I think. We need examiners, analysts. The automated tools do a really good job of getting the information off the device. I mean, when I started, you imaged a thing, you grabbed your right blocker, you plugged it into your tower, you had your work drive in your tower and you fired up FTK Imager. Or if you're in Linux, you did a DD, or you used Incase. And, you got something running. It made that copy. It made that image, that bit for bit copy of the hard drive. And it dumped it into, usually, most people use EO1 for compression, save space, or use a RAW, whatever, your flavor of the day. And that was fine, and then you process that and this and that. I now have a TX1. It's an all-in-one imaging device, and the thing is glorious. I mean, it's a phenomenal piece of equipment. We also have the TD3, which, since we got the TX1s, have since been relegated back to their case and kicked into a corner because it was a nightmare. But the TX1's great because now I can image a device, walk away from it, go do something else. And the training wise for me is, can we train people to hook something to a box and hit a button? Totally. So let's train the young guys that maybe they're not going to ever do the exams. They're not into the forensics, but we can still train them how to, get the device and get the data because the tool is automated, because it is literally, hey, hit a button. And if it doesn't work, then they can bring it to the examiner. Hey, this didn't work when I hit the button, or somebody's a little bit more versed in it, maybe can be around. And then that way the data's done and they can bring that and take that step out. And honestly, I've seen a couple of places starting to work a flow. It's coming down to workflow is, for me, we started with computers. We do computers. We've done phones. And I don't know if you've been messing with drones, but you can do a drone. And yeah, I know you've done GPS units and then skimmers. And, there's the in-vehicle forensics with the infotainment systems now. And all that stuff's great. DVR units. It's great to know all of it. But it's getting to the point now for me, and I've seen a lot of agencies doing this, where this guy is a computer guy. He does their computers. This is our phone guy, which needs to be phone guys, because that's what's coming in the most. Because every interaction now, I mean, since probably, I don't know what you would think, but I'm thinking since about 2015 forwards, almost every law enforcement interaction, there's a smartphone.
Oh, yeah.
There's some type of smartphone involved. The person has one on them. There's one in the vehicle. There's just, I get phones now that were found in abandoned cars. And now it's like, hey, this car was stolen and this phone was inside of it. Okay, you hook it up and it's a victim from another theft. didn't belong to the bad guy, it belonged to another victim somewhere. It's like, well, I don't think this is going to help you find the suspects, but here's this poor person's property back.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But you still just did an examination, be it that could be a triage type examination to find out, oh, well, here's the information from the phone. That's basic stuff, but it's still, you spend time.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's getting to the point where it's like that phone came in right next to a homicide and right next to a child abuse case and right next to a guy who's stealing millions of dollars from a charity.
Right.
It's like, how do you pick and choose which ones to
Yeah.
work?
Yeah, I think that's pretty important. Again, I liked your idea of, I mean, having more analysts, because that's important. I think it all comes down to, now. Sometimes the most difficult part is doing the collection, right? Where you start talking about file-based encryption, all these other things, right, that you have. So it becomes a little tricky, but I think that the most important part is data, right?
Yeah.
Is actually being able to interpret the data. Take obviously the tool, because again, it's extremely important, but it should be used as just that, a tool, to kind of lead you into your analysis and examination, not necessarily as a report generator, right?
Yeah,
So
and that's what I've always seen the automated tools as, and you and I still refer them as automated tools, having had to do some of this manually ourselves, like, and still do. The automated tools aren't perfect. I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's been some articles about one of the larger mobile automated tools being hacked.
yeah.
No proof of concept was given in the article, so it's really hard to say if the guy's just blowing smoke. My joke to the peers I was discussing it with was, well, maybe he caught a case and he's just trying to build a good defense.
Possible.
Because it's
Possible.
like, well, it could also corrupt previous reports.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Like, well,
Yes.
if you know that tool, it's like, well, once you generate the report, you're pretty much done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
there's not much
So
corruption done with a PDF.
yeah. So one of the things I always like to leave people with too is really asking the guest, because those artifacts. What is something that you can leave? Maybe your favorite artifacts that obviously every examination and analysis is different, right? Dependent upon the case, but typically there's a few artifacts that it doesn't matter really what case is, that you kind of utilize those. And let's just talk about with mobile devices. I mean, what are some artifacts that it doesn't matter, Android, iOS, or a mixture of both. What are some things that people just need to always be kind of looking into, for some nice nuggets?
It came back to what you were saying earlier, is the logs. Yeah, most of the tools present the messaging, the communication. That's great. Oh, well, here it is. It's in this app. Well, that's fine. That's dandy. But my favorite artifacts now that we're getting into them easier, and even now that they're being automatically parsed out and presented in a better fashion, and some of the tools now as well, is great. Is that okay? When was the app in focus? Was it on the screen? How long was this app on the screen? You know, it's one of those things where I've had been brought in cases, thefts, and this and that, and the person was smart enough to turn their phone off, before committing said crime, and then turning the phone back on after said crime. And the glorious thing is these phones record this, or maybe they just want to leave the phone on, but they put it into airplane mode. It's those artifacts that the phone, or it seems innocuous to most people as you use your phone, but for something like what we're doing, like, hey, I'm looking to see, because it's like, oh, well, here's this conversation, but it happened 3 hours after the event. Why? And I know in years past, it's like, well, I'm not sure. So let's go dig. And it's like, the operating systems have evolved to record more information over the years. Android didn't record per se, at least not easily found sometimes, when airplane mode was turned on or off. And that's a great thing. It's like, oh, you know, the location system was turned off here and turned back on here. That's why the phone jumped from A to B, but there's this huge time gap. Timeline is a big one also. I think timeline analysis has always been kind of a great thing to have. I remember when we started getting the timelines and the tools versus trying to just sort things by date and going, okay, well, this is here, write that down on the notepad. All right, artifact, da 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 da. And then, of course, you have to write down sorted by created date,
Right.
descending. In the tool, it's like, okay, artifact 22 and then artifact 44. Build that timeline. It's nice to see we can build a graphical timeline, because building a graphical timeline in the past with a PowerPoint was not fun. Uh,
Right.
it's always nice to have that chart show
Yeah.
up at the report side. But like I said, the low hanging fruit, the obvious stuff, that the conversation you're looking for, the pictures you're looking for, even that location data, um, it's great, but the stuff to support it for me has always been the better, because then when I go write my narrative, I like to write my narratives to keep from going on the stand to testify in court. I've played that since I started at the ICAC, to try to prevent having to go give testimony. I've done it many, many times, but it's always nice to not have to lay that out, so that basically the defendant and his counsel or her counsel can look at that data and say, hey, listen, yeah, that's the artifact, but then they keep reading and they're like, oh. So the app was started at and was utilized in the foreground based on this record from the device for the 35 minutes during the event in which these messages were sent back and forth and the communication was made. Things like that really just kind of hammer home that you're not just clicking it on the screen and throwing it in the report.
Right.
You understand where the data came from. This is user generated data. Because in a world where everybody has one, two cell phones, a smartwatch, their laptops interconnected, in the Apple infrastructure, your MacBook's connected to your iPhone, connected to your iWatch, connected to your other Mac, in the iCloud. And now in the Android infrastructure, at least, from Samsung, they're buddy with Microsoft. So now your Windows is hooked, because Windows Phone died. Your Windows is hooked to your Android, and you're getting that same type of pattern of life of data, that your data can move in this circular fashion between all your devices. It's just nice to know that, hey, this data was generated here on the device I'm examining. It didn't come from the cloud. It didn't get generated like they're telling me, oh, that must have been so and so messing on my computer.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
it's nice to be able to just hammer that home when you do that, write that narrative. And I do still write out a lengthy narrative report. I don't just hand off the tools reports. I mean, and I say reports because I run things through multiple tools.
Right.
Um, I like to piece it together, and I do like to make it somewhat prosecutor proof, or even defense proof, in the fact that I like to put it in clear text in case I get a non-text savvy
Sure.
prosecutor, defense attorney, or ultimately a jury or a
Right.
judge.
Right. Right.
That's also the key. And that's where I think the IT background helped, being able
Yeah.
to take the jargon and the tech and then just bring it down to that level where somebody can read it and go, that's a little confusing, but I see where he's going with it. And it does make sense. And then I have a big glossary at the back of my report so they can look up the words.
Yeah, I think that's extremely important to obviously take it in, and especially the reporting side of it, because the expectation, you're like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna write this at this certain level, just so that it's understandable, because then you're just gonna be spending a lot more time trying to explain that rather than obviously writing that. But man, covered a lot of stuff. I do appreciate obviously the time that you spent, especially on a Friday. And I do appreciate everything that you do. And again, it's been a long time. So, hey, once I'm sure I'll see you here eventually when things decide to open up. I never want to say go back to normal because I don't think it ever will. But you know, possibly we shall see. But I do appreciate all the things that you do and continue the great work.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. And next time we will make sure that we'll do some PowerPoints where you can you can show me all of this stuff. Awesome. All right. Perfect. Excellent. Another forensic happy hour down and in the books. I think that the point that Jason and myself and we're trying to make is really, well, a couple of points, right? One being that you don't necessarily have to live in the matrix to forensics to understand, say, the operating system level. But I think the big takeaway is really that love to get in the weeds, I guess that would be the word, right? So to the artifacts, not simply relying on an automated tool, but being able to justify, right? Justify the data that's presented to you by the tool, and also be able to understand how the data lives within, say, a third-party app that might not be supported by a tool or parsed out. Because even if a tool supports a third-party application, there might be some tables, there might be some other information that's not necessarily parsed out. I can most certainly testify to that. So, make sure that you are diving in, looking into some of these things. I think that's the most important takeaway if you want to get into this world, into forensic side of it. And even if you're doing it right now, yeah, enjoy and get into, I don't want to say the hex level, but obviously understand the different formats, log files, as we had talked about, because it's just a machine. It has to remember what it's doing, so it writes notes. So I appreciate everyone's time again. We'll be back again next week. And so look for that guest coming out on Tuesday. I appreciate it. Everybody have a great weekend. Thanks.